If I told you in 2018 that someone was going to start an electrolyte company and compete with Gatorade, a brand doing $6.7 billion in annual sales, and their marketing tactic was going to be to give away free samples to podcasters, you'd think I was crazy. You'd say the sports drink market is dominated by Pepsi and Coke. You'd say nobody cares about electrolyte packets. You'd say consumers want sweet drinks, not salty ones. And yet, by 2023, LMNT crossed $200 million in revenue with 20% net margins. All this with less than $6 million raised in funding. They did it without traditional advertising, without celebrity endorsements, and without competing on taste with Gatorade. They did it by turning podcasters into their most effective sales force and then built off that marketing foundation. Today, we're breaking down how LMNT dominated the keto and wellness market through podcast advertising and free sample distribution with orders. We'll look at the crowded industry they entered, their contrarian insight about who to target, and the specific tactics they used to scale. Back it up with marketing research, and then give you the playbook to apply to your business. Let's dig in. LMNT launched into one of the most competitive beverage categories imaginable, hydration. The sports drink market in 2022 was valued at $10.4 billion. But here's the problem. It's growing at 6.6% annually, and it's completely dominated by two giants. Gatorade owns roughly 70% market share. Powerade takes another 20%. Everyone else fights over the scraps. And there's a bigger problem. Consumers think they know what hydration drinks should be. Sweet, colorful, low in sodium, because we've all been told for decades that salt raises blood pressure and causes heart problems. So when LMNT launched with 1,000 milligrams of sodium per packet, nearly 5 times what's in Gatorade, zero sugar, and flavors like raspberry salt and mango chill, they faced a massive education problem. The market didn't understand why they needed this much sodium. Traditional sports drink buyers thought it sounded dangerous, and LMNT couldn't afford Super Bowl ads to educate millions of people at once. They needed a different approach. LMNT's founder, Rob Wolf, a former research biochemist and 2-time New York Times bestselling author on paleo nutrition, had already spent years building a massive following in the low-carb and keto communities through his podcast and books. He knew something the big beverage companies didn't. People on keto, paleo, and low-carb diets have a specific, painful electrolyte problem. When you cut carbs, your body dumps water and sodium. You get what's called keto flu, fatigue, headaches, brain fog, and muscle cramps. The solution isn't more water, it's more salt. But existing electrolyte drinks were packed with sugar, which kicks you out of ketosis and woefully low on actual electrolytes. So Wolf and his team created a product with the exact sodium, potassium, and magnesium ratio these communities needed. No sugar, no artificial ingredients, just electrolytes. But here's the genius marketing insight. Instead of trying to educate the mass market about sodium science, they went narrow. They targeted the exact people who already understood the problem and were actively, desperately seeking a solution. And they knew exactly where these people spent their time: health and wellness podcasts. Shows like Huberman Lab with Andrew Huberman, Lex Freeman, The Tim Ferriss Show, Peter Attia's Drive, Joe Rogan. These weren't entertainment podcasts. They were long-form educational shows where hosts spent 2 to 3 hours diving deep into topics like metabolic health, electrolytes, and human optimization. The audience wasn't passive. They were taking notes. Here's what LMNT did that was different from every other beverage brand. First, they built a free sample pack program specifically for podcast listeners. Every podcast that partnered with them got a custom URL, something like drinklmnt.com/Huberman or whoever the podcast host was. And listeners could get a free 8-serving sample pack added to their order when they purchased any LMNT product. Here's the genius. It wasn't just pay for shipping like most sample programs. They had to buy at least one box of LMNT to get the free samples. This accomplished two things simultaneously. It filtered out the people who were ready to buy, and it gave them extra flavors to try so they'd know exactly what to reorder. Think about the psychology. If you're willing to drop $45 on a 30-pack based on a podcast recommendation, you're already a qualified customer. The free sample pack wasn't just about acquisition. It was about customer lifetime value, increasing ARPU, average revenue per user, and being able to test flavors by keeping track of what customers actually ordered. According to their 2023 SEC filings, LMNT spent $7.1 million on product sampling, including fulfillment. That sounds expensive until you understand the math. Customers who try multiple flavors through the sample pack repurchase an average of 5 to 6 times per year. The sample program doesn't just recover customer acquisition costs. It increases lifetime value by giving customers the ability to discover their favorite flavors. Second, they targeted long-form partnerships, not just one-off ads. Look at their podcast footprint. They've run more than 40 ad placements on some shows dating back to 2021. They're not spraying and praying. They're building relationships. According to advertising industry analysis, LMNT maintains about a 10-to-1 ratio of ads per show. That means once they find a show that converts, they commit long-term. They're on Huberman Lab almost every week. Same thing with Lex Fridman. Same with dozens of other health and wellness shows. Third, they made the podcast hosts genuine product advocates, not just ad readers. The free sample strategy meant every listener could experience the product options at no risk. And because the hosts genuinely used LMNT, often talking about mixing it in their morning routine or using it after workouts, their endorsements felt authentic, not scripted. This created a trust loop. The host explains the science of electrolytes, then recommends LMNT. The listener trusts the host. The listener buys and gets samples of other flavors. The listener feels the difference. The listener reorders and becomes a longtime customer. By 2023, LMNT had crossed $200 million in revenue with a 20% net margin. That's almost software company economics in a beverage business. They achieved this with just over $6 million in total funding, a fraction of what most CPG brands raise. For context, their competitor Liquid IV raised significantly more capital before being acquired by Unilever for somewhere between $200 and $300 million, while doing about $100 million in revenue. LMNT did double that revenue on a fraction of the funding. So why did this podcast-first strategy work so well? According to Nielsen's 2021 Trust in Advertising study, which surveyed over 40,000 consumers across 56 countries, 88% of people trust recommendations from people they know above all other forms of marketing. Word of mouth isn't just the most trusted channel. It beats everything else by a massive margin. TV ads, 58% trust. Social media ads, 42%. Influencer ads, just 23% trust them. But here's what LMNT understood that most brands miss. Podcast hosts occupy a unique psychology space. Research published in the Journal of Psychology and Marketing found that parasocial relationships, the one-sided relationships listeners develop with podcast hosts, create trust levels nearly equivalent to recommendations from friends and family. When you listen to someone for 2 hours every week talking about their morning routine, their workout regime, their health philosophy, you feel like you know them. And when they recommend a product they generally use, it doesn't just feel like an ad. It feels like advice from a trusted friend. LMNT didn't just buy podcast ads. They earned credibility with the audience who had spent dozens of hours building trust with these hosts. And the free sample strategy, it eliminated the final barrier. Research from Harvard Business School and Yale University found that when there's a reward or incentive involved in a referral, it overcomes the psychological risk that the recommendation might be bad. And for the people struggling with keto flu symptoms, the first experience was dramatic. Suddenly, the headaches were gone. The brain fog listed. Energy came back. That's not marketing. That's product market fit if you feel it in your body within 20 minutes. Okay, so here's how to apply it to your business, even if you're not selling electrolytes. First, stop trying to educate everyone. Find the audience that already knows they have the problem you solve. LMNT didn't just try to convince the mass market that they needed more sodium. They found people on keto who already were Googling keto flu remedies. Go where the pain already exists. 2, identify where your audience trusts information. For LMNT, it was health podcasts with credible hosts. For you, it might be industry newsletters, LinkedIn thought leaders, YouTube channels in your niche, or specific subreddits where your ideal customers congregate. Find the voices they already trust. 3, build partnerships, not campaigns. LMNT didn't run a podcast ad once and move on. They committed to 40 plus placements on shows that converted. Repetition builds familiarity. Familiarity builds trust. Trust drives purchases. Pick the channels and go deep, not wide. 4, make trials as frictionless as humanly possible. Free samples, free trials, money-back guarantees, free shipping, whatever removes the risks of trying your product. LMNT spent $7 million on samples in 2023 because they knew their product would convert once people tried it. What's the version of your free sample? 5, align with credible voices, not just large audiences. LMNT partnered with Andrew Huberman and Peter Attia, scientists and doctors who already understood the research. They didn't chase Instagram influencers with millions of followers, but zero domain expertise. Credibility beats reach when you're selling a science-backed product. 6th, let the product do the talking. LMNT's strategy only worked because their product genuinely solves a painful problem. No amount of podcast advertising will save a mediocre product. Make sure what you're selling actually delivers on the promise before you scale distribution. LMNT proved you don't need to outspend Gatorade to win in a competitive market. You just need to find your people, earn their trust through the right voices, make it easy for them to try what you're selling, and then deliver a product that actually works really well. That's the LMNT playbook: narrow targeting, trusted channels, long-term partnerships, frictionless trials, and a product that generally solves a problem. If you're competing in a crowded market against bigger, better funded players, stop trying to out-advertise them. Find where your ideal customers already gather, partner with the voices they trust, and make it stupid easy for them to experience your product. Your marketing move this week? Identify one trusted voice in your niche and reach out to them about a genuine partnership, not a one-off sponsored post, a real relationship where you can add value to their audience consistently. If your product solves a real problem, word of mouth will do the rest. Your marketing move.